It did not take the terrible events of last year at a synagogue in Pittsburgh, where a gunman killed 11 people, to remind our next guest that anti-Semitism is still with us. She has confronted it head-on over a distinguished career writing and studying its enduring rot. Deborah Lipstadt is the Dorah Professor of Modern Jewish and Holocaust Studies at Emory University. Her new book is Anti-Semitism, Here and Now. And we welcome her back to TVO. It's so nice to have you in that chair this time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
You've been here before, but only on satellite.
Right.
So I actually got to shake your hand this time. It was
Virtually.
Nice. You recently wrote, quote, "A perfect storm of anti-Semitism is not just brewing, but is upon us." How do you see that storm manifesting itself?
Well, what I see is anti-Semitism coming from the political right, as in Charlottesville. I see it coming from the political left, as we saw in the Women's March in the United States. We see in Jeremy Corbyn in the Labor Party in England. And the third direction is Islamist jihadist extremists who have caused quite a lot of damage, particularly, but not only in Europe. And also in sectors of the Muslim community, a anti-Semitism that is not going to provoke those people to pick, those who are infected with it, to pick up a machete or a gun, but who get a sense of antipathy, hatred for Jews.
You mentioned Europe, and I want to pick up on that, because we're going to show some numbers here. This is from a survey of Jews in 12 European countries and reveals the following. Sheldon, the graphic, please. Here we go. 28% of all respondents, 28%, said they experienced anti-Semitic harassment at least once during the period of the survey. Those who display items in public that could identify them as Jewish are subject to more anti-Semitic harassment, that'd be 37%, than those who do not, 21%. Nearly half, 47% of the respondents worried about being subjected to anti-Semitic verbal insults or harassment, and 4 in 10 worried about an anti-Semitic physical attack. About a third, 34% of respondents, avoid visiting Jewish events or sites because they say they do not feel safe as Jews when they are there or on their way there. Almost 4 in 10, 38%, in the 5 years preceding the survey because they did not feel safe as Jews in the country where they live. That's Europe. How would you compare the experience of being Jewish in Europe, where we see those numbers, to being Jewish in North America?
I think it's a little bit different. I think, and that study, which was a compelling study when it came out, was done by the European Union. So it's got a lot of gravitas. I think there is a greater fear in Europe. In Europe, it's not common at all, or it's increasingly uncommon in certain cities, in certain sectors of certain cities, for Jews to go with kippot, to Jews to walk with the head covering, a T-shirt that might say the Jewish Music Festival or something like that. And there have been so many attacks in Europe. I mean, here we've had Pittsburgh, and I think in North America, both in the United States and in Canada, increasing numbers of synagogues are investing in security guards. I was talking to someone yesterday in Denver, Colorado, where the Jewish preschool in their synagogue for the little kids is investing in tinted glass so you can't see through, special iPads that control who comes in and who goes out, and everything can be seen, some doors that are locked, some doors that are kept open for escape. So people are living more on the edge.
In this city in which you find yourself right now, which I think has the biggest Jewish community in Canada, during high holiday services, you will see at every major and many minor synagogues in this city, police officers with machine guns standing at the doors.
That's right.
What do you think of that?
I'm glad they're there. I appreciate their being there. I always am very careful to thank them. It's the same thing in my city, in Atlanta, Georgia, in our synagogue. And I'm sad that they're there because the kids coming to synagogue, all they have to do is look across the street, in the case of my synagogue, maybe down the block, and look at the church. And they don't see guards on Christmas or Easter in front of the synagogue. They don't see people with machine guns. And it doesn't take them long to figure out we need to be protected and the other folk don't.
There's one more bit of data from that same survey by the European Union that we want to pass along to our viewers. Here we go again, Sheldon. 30% of anti-Semitic incidents were perpetrated by individuals with an extremist Muslim view, 21% by individuals with a left-wing point of view, 13% by persons with a right-wing point of view. What do you make of that?
Well, it fits with my knowledge and my experience. I'm in Europe a lot, and I think that makes sense. I think it's different in North America. More has come from the right wing, certainly in the United States. More has come from the right wing in terms of physical attacks than from the left. The left expresses it differently. In the left, it's more institutionalized. It's more verbal. It's rhetoric, which is equally dangerous because it makes Jews feel uncomfortable and unwanted and not part of the majority. But it's pretty sobering. I was in Stockholm this past week. I just came here directly from Stockholm. And I had decided I would go to the Grand Synagogue in the center of Stockholm for Saturday morning. I was sure to let my hosts, I was there on behalf of the governmental institution, to let them know I wanted to go so they could inform the synagogue. But somehow the people inside knew I was coming. The guards at the door didn't. And it took 6-7 minutes of questioning, and where are you from, and what synagogue do you go to, and what's the name of your rabbi, and what are you doing here? And I thought...
Before they let you in?
Before they let us in. Huh. Finally, someone walked up and said, "Oh, that's Deborah Lipstadt. She's here giving speeches, and she's going to speak to 1,000 people in the synagogue tomorrow." They let me in.
Just because we're intending to drown you in numbers, we're going to show one more survey here. This is the Anti-Defamation of League conducting a worldwide survey of anti-Semitic views. This is about 5 years ago. Study revealed that about a quarter of the world's population harbored anti-Semitic feelings with much variety between different countries. For example, in Turkey, the number is 71%. In Denmark, just 8%. In Canada, 14%. In the U.S., 9%. We always think we're morally superior to Americans, but apparently we're not. Interestingly, in Mongolia, where you wouldn't think they'd run into too many Jews in Mongolia, it is 26%. How do you explain the presence of anti-Jewish feelings in places where there are no Jews?
Well, we've seen that before. Look, anti-Semitism is called the oldest or the longest hatred. It goes back well over 2,000 years, and it's been embedded in society, and it's been politicized. So the fact that you can have anti-Semitism without Jews, it's a conspiracy theory. It's not rational. You need someone to blame. You need someone to sort of put all the responsibility for whatever problems you're facing, and Jews are an easy target.
I'm going to give you the top 5 reasons why people harbor anti-Semitic feelings, and then you tell me which is the one that comes the closest to explaining hatred of Jews. Number 1, Jews are more loyal to Israel than the country in which they live. Number 2, Jews have too much power in the business world. Number 3, Jews still talk too much about what happened to them in the Holocaust. 4, Jews don't care what happens to anyone but their own kind. 5, Jews think that they are better than other people. Which one comes the closest to explaining anti-Semitism?
I think they all are part of anti-Semitism. I think, sometimes people have a hard time defining anti-Semitism. Sometimes you say, I know it when I see it, but I can't define it. But
That's
I think
the Potter Stewart definition.
Right, exactly, from the Supreme Court in the United States.
Give us the best definition of anti-Semitism.
I would say that you look for, the template of an anti-Semitic charge is to look for 3 elements: something to do with money, something to do with power, and something to do with a nefarious or malicious use of that power. That Jews are smarter than, but it's not a good smarts, it's a cunning smarts. And they use those smarts to hurt other people, to get their way, to get others to do their way. The stereotypes, for instance, in my country, the stereotypes of African American, the prejudicial stereotypes, not the facts, are different. There, they're shiftless, they're lazy, they're gangs, they're criminals, etc. Each group, the stereotypes of Italians, less so now, but used to be all mafioso. Each group has its own stereotype that's been applied to it. With Jews, it's money, power, and the nefarious use of that power to the disadvantage of others.
Then let's ask the next question, which is, one of the great debates in the world right now is whether you can be anti-Israeli but not be anti-Semitic, or whether being against Israel or against Zionism, or even more directly against the Benjamin Netanyahu government, and not be anti-Semitic. Where do you come down on that?
I come down in a pretty, again, tried to nuanced fashion. Criticism of Israeli policies is not anti-Semitism, and you will hear Israeli diplomats, ambassadors make that very clear. If you want to read criticism of Israeli policies, go read Haaretz, the Israeli daily on the more left liberal daily that's pretty much opposed to Netanyahu's government, and you'll see criticism of Israeli policies daily. So that's not anti-Semitism. I think when you question the right of there to be a Jewish state, when you question the right of Jews to have a state, especially now that a state exists with over 6 million Jews in it, that's a pretty dicey kind of. You're getting away from criticism of policies to criticism of the right to exist, and that doesn't mean that Israel hasn't made mistakes and Israel hasn't done things that are wrong and the IDF hasn't done things that are wrong. There's no army in the world that hasn't done things that are wrong. It's made up of people. People do good things and they do bad things. But when you focus on the wrongs committed by Israel or the faults committed by Israel to the exclusion of all others, not only all others in the parties in the Middle East, but all other wrongs, all other shortcomings, you have to ask why? Why this fixation? Why this singular focus? Why not others as well? And one academic in the United States well, you have to start somewhere. That's not a sufficient answer.
What if you believe that all Palestinians, wherever they live in the world, are entitled to return to their ancestral homeland, to the towns and villages in which their ancestors lived years ago, and you criticize Israeli policies which, at the moment, prohibit that? Does that make you an anti-Semite?
I don't know if it makes you an anti-Semite, but it certainly makes you, I would say yes, because that would presuppose the destruction of Israel if that
as it currently is constituted.
As a Jewish state, right. And people say, well, we'll have a binational state. Show me one other state under a Muslim government, in which a religious minority has thrived. I mean, there used to be a Christian minority throughout the Middle East. In most countries, they've left, they've disappeared. There certainly were Jewish minorities in all those states. They were thrown out. So the right of return, there have been groups that have been forced to leave, dispossessed, left of their own accord throughout history. And generally, we work to get maybe the people who left themselves to go back. But only in this case is it, 5 generations later. I don't see the Muslim states, Egypt, Iraq, Iran, Morocco. Well, Morocco still has a Jewish population. Algeria, all countries which push the Jews out, welcoming them.
Well, here's where it gets trickier, because there are Jews who believe in the Palestinians' right of return.
That's right.
Are they anti-Semites as well?
Well, I think you could be an anti-Semite.
And be Jewish?
And sure, you can be a racist and be black. You can think, oh my God, I'm successful, but all my fellow African Americans or black people, they don't work hard, or indigenous people, I'm successful, but if those others would just quit doing whatever the stereotype is, they would be successful too. There is nothing to keep a person who is of a minority that against whom prejudice is directed from absorbing and internalizing that prejudice.
I want to ask you about a couple of leaders in the Western world who often get tagged with this label of being anti-Semitic. Let's start with the leader of the Labour Party in Britain. Do you think Jeremy Corbyn's an anti-Semite?
I don't know if he's an anti-Semite. I don't know what's in his heart. And I think that's the wrong question, if I can rewrite your question. The question is, has he facilitated anti-Semitism? Has he accepted anti-Semitism? Has he looked the other way when he's encountered anti-Semitism?
He certainly hangs out with anti-Semites.
He hasn't met an anti-Semite, I think, that he doesn't want to hang out, that he objects to hang out with because they're an anti-Semite. Yes, there's one group. If you're a right-wing fascist, that he recognizes as an anti-Semite. But anything to the left of that, he seems to have trouble recognizing it.
And the other guy I got to ask you about, obviously, is your president.
Donald Trump.
Do you think he is?
I have no idea. I don't think so. I think he's very proud that his daughter converted to Judaism. I think he's proud of his Jewish grandchildren who are being raised as Jews and fairly traditional Jews. But I think he too has fomented sentiments that lead to anti-Semitism. Those people marching in Charlottesville, chanting, "Jews will not replace us."
Cover of the book, please. Wide shot of the Jumbotron. That's from Charlottesville.
That's from Charlottesville, right.
Yeah. He doesn't see it, though.
He's talked about good people on both sides. Yeah. When David Duke, the former leader of the Ku Klux Klan, was saying all sorts of wonderful things about him, he said, I don't know who David Duke is. I really can't comment. He didn't want to reject the support, even though 10 years earlier he had said David Duke is not a good man and not a person to support politically. The fact of the matter is that all right-wingers, white supremacists, when we talk about white supremacists, that included in that is anti-Semitism, because on the far right, they don't see Jews as white. Jews are other. Such as the killer in Pittsburgh, Jews were not white in his eyes. If something I said or something people with whom I disagree sort of interpreted my actions as supporting them, as the far right interprets Donald Trump's actions as supporting them, as being in their camp, as wanting an America that's white and wanting an America that's all of a certain kind. And I didn't believe that. I would say, hey, you guys got me wrong. I'm not in your camp. You haven't heard that.
No. I don't know how many times I've had this conversation with people in the Jewish community here in Toronto, but it's a lot. And the one thing that is frequently fed back to me is, if only we push education enough, we can convince people the Holocaust actually happened. We can convince the deniers of that. We can convince people that anti-Semitism makes no sense. How do you see the power of education in this field?
Look, education is my business. Education is my tool. So I would love to say absolutely correct. But I look back on history, and a good part of the murders that became the Holocaust, the genocidal actions of the Nazis, were committed by groups called the Einsatzgruppen, the mobile killing units. And they operated on the Eastern Front. There were 4 major units with help from local militia and local gendarmes, et cetera. 3 of those 4 units were led with people with a PhD. One was an ordained minister. You know, a friend of mine used to say, you can be a PhD and an SOB at the same time. So I wish education was an antidote. I'm not saying you can't educate against this, but I think it's got to be education in the schools and what goes on at home. A lot of what people pick up at home is there. In terms of deniers, answering deniers or proving them wrong, that on some level, that's easy to do. For deniers to be right, who would have to be wrong? All the survivors who tell you the story of what happened, this happened to me. All the bystanders, the people who lived in the towns and the villages near where the killing took place.
Who knew?
Who saw. I mean, they could. You can't expect them to have been able to stop it because there was a German wave. I mean, in many cases, of course, they participated and they assisted. But who else? The historians. Thousands of historians. You have very fine historians here in Toronto even, and throughout Canada and throughout the United States and throughout Europe and the Middle East and even in China and Japan who have studied aspects of the Holocaust. They would all have to have been part of the hoax or be duped. It doesn't make sense. And ultimately, who would have to be wrong? The perpetrators. In not one war crimes trial since the end of World War II has a perpetrator ever said it didn't happen. I didn't do it. I had no choice. I wasn't there. I was only watching, but not that it didn't happen. Where are these people who were supposedly never killed? Where's the contemporary evidence? Deniers don't have a shred of contemporary evidence to prove their point. It's a ridiculous narrative. Anybody who succumbs to it, I would say, is succumbing to an anti-Semitic hoax.
But you're trying to introduce empirically provable facts against an essentially irrational argument.
Yes, it's very hard.
Can't win.
You can't win. That's why when I wrote this book and when I did my work on deniers, my original work on deniers, I wasn't trying to convince them. I'm not trying to convince the anti-Semites in this book. What I'm trying to do is educate those who might be impacted by the anti-Semite. You know, I just got off a plane coming here to Toronto, and I was sitting next to someone. I didn't have much of a chat with him. Hello, how are you? Whatever. But what if that person had been a burning anti-Semite or a burning racist or Holocaust denier, and they had begun to work on me, you know, and to give me all their arguments? I'm the person, not the person who's spreading it, but the person who might be susceptible. I want them to hear and say, oh, I know what you're doing. I know what you're saying. I know who you are. And those are the people I'm aiming at.
I want to let everybody know that this is a joke, okay? This is a joke. It's in her book, but it's a joke, and it's been around for a long time. An anti-Semite is someone who hates Jews more than is necessary.
Right. More than is absolutely necessary.
Absolutely necessary. Okay. Which raises the question, are there are there acceptable reasons why some people would not like Jews?
Look, dislike all Jews is like disliking all kinds of people. Then you're dealing in a prejudice, prejudge. Don't confuse me with the facts. I've made up my mind. But to dislike other Jews, you want to find dislike of other Jews? Go to a synagogue board meeting. Go to a Jewish organizational board meeting. People yelling and screaming at each other, etc. Jews are a rowdy people in that sense. But even that joke, disliking Jews more than is absolutely necessary. Think about it. Imagine you're driving on the highway and somebody swipes you and you go off, you flip, you almost are killed, and you come to and you are shaken, but you get home and you come in and everyone says, what happened? And you say, I was on the highway and I was forced off the highway by a terrible driver. He did it on purpose because he couldn't have, it wasn't in his way, a black driver. That's racism. Because this being black has nothing to do with what happened. If a police officer stops you and says, I saw what happened, describe the driver to me, and you tell her, oh, that driver was driving this kind of car and this tall, that whatever, and he was black, that's not racist.
Different.
That's different. Yeah. So, if I'm in trouble with the law, and I know I need a good lawyer, and I say, I need a really smart, really talented lawyer, that's one thing. But if I say I need a really smart, talented Jewish lawyer, that's philo-Semitism. That's, Franklin Foer, an American journalist, described the philo-Semite, someone who loves them, as an anti-Semite who likes Jews, because when the lawyer loses the case, maybe because you're guilty of sin and there's no way I can get you off, and you're going to be found guilty, what is he going to do? He's going to turn around and say, that damn Jewish lawyer. I don't know if you're allowed to say that on the...
You just did. You just did. Well, we haven't met before, actually.
Right.
But we've talked before via satellite, because you were on this program 12 years ago, and you were talking about whether or not there might be, you just mentioned the Jewish lawyer, whether Jews are disproportionately represented in various professions or various fields. You want to know what you said 12 years ago?
Tell me what I said.
We're going to tell you anyway.
I may shudder.
Let's see. Sheldon, clip, please.
Absolutely. Once Emory University, many, many years ago, had admitted a large number of Jews. This is long before I came here. And the student newspaper began to interview people on campus, are there too many Jews at Emory? And they asked one pundit on campus, and he said, I think it was the Hillel rabbi. He said, I don't understand the concept of too many Jews. He said there are only 3 places where there can be too many Jews: hospitals, cemeteries, and concentration camps. I don't know what it means, too many. Are there too many blacks in the NBA? Are there too many, Italians in politics in New York? I don't know what too many means. Yes, different groups seem to gravitate to different areas. I'm not denying the fact, I'm not hiding the fact or made uncomfortable by the fact that many Jews have accomplished and done very well, both economically, academically. They are high achievers.
Do you still agree with yourself 12 years later?
Yeah. I mean, people gravitate towards certain things. So I don't know what too many is. As I was arguing 12 years ago, so there's a certain consistency. Plus the fact that even if there are many people in one particular field, is that a reason to hate them? Too many lawyers. If you're in trouble with the law, you need a lawyer. If you're buying a home, you need a lawyer. If you're having a fight with someone, you need a lawyer. Bankers, we can dislike bankers, but if I need a mortgage, I want a banker. If I want to start a startup, I need financial help. So this whole idea of demonizing, I think, is dangerous.
Does it, though, help explain why some people are nervous or suspicious of Jews if they see Jews overrepresented in certain professions?
No, because I think they come to it with a pre-existing notion. So that, there are many Jews who are doctors. There are Jews who are quote unquote overrepresented in the medical field. Do we go in and we say, oh my God, I can't have a Jewish doctor? You're happy. I want a smart doctor. I don't care what that doctor's background is. I want a doctor who can cure me. If a lawyer, I want a lawyer who can make sure I'm dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's in my legal documents. I think anybody who presupposes, though, because there are more Jews there, they must be doing something nefarious, is seeing it through a anti-Semitic lens. Oh, they're Jews. Oh, they're evil. The prejudice presupposes, pre-exists, and then they bring it to the situation.
Let's finish up on another quip here, shall we? It is said that Jewish optimism, the Jewish optimist, is someone who thinks that things can't get any worse. Are you an optimist?
I am an optimist. I am an optimist. You know, they say the Jewish optimist is someone who thinks things can't get any worse, and the pessimist knows that they can, you know, and knows that they are. I'm a pretty optimistic person. I'm concerned about what we're seeing today, but I couldn't have spent the past 3 to 4 decades working on the Holocaust, working on Holocaust deniers, and now swimming in the sewers of anti-Semitism for the past 2.5, 3 years if I wasn't an optimistic person. I wouldn't have written this book if I wasn't an optimistic person. I have a hope that if we educate people, if we expose people, if we make them understand, A, how dangerous this is, it's a good thing. And maybe to end on a note, you know, if you're going to fight anti-Semitism, don't fight just because you have a Jewish neighbor or Jewish friends and you don't want them to be hurt or to live in fear. That's good, but that's not the reason. Or if you're going to fight anti-Semitism just because you hate prejudice against all minorities, religious, ethnic, whatever it might be, that's a good thing, but that's not sufficient. The reason to fight anti-Semitism is that it poses a danger to the democratic societies in which we live. No healthy democratic society can harbor that kind of animus, that kind of hatred, and be called a healthy society.
That is a great place to leave this. The book is called Anti-Semitism Here and Now. Deborah Lipstadt, would you promise to come back here before 12 years from now?
Absolutely, and I won't wear a sweater tied around my neck.
You're on. Thanks so much. Great to
You're
have you
welcome.
here.
Thank you for having me.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.